Now, an interesting thing about your sensory memory is that you can, as I was saying before, you can store a lot of information in your sensory memory, a whole lot, basically everything you see, but it doesn't last very long. Okay? You know, we forget it very quickly. What a memory researcher named Sperling did, he studied sensory memory, he studied memory, and one of the things he did was he showed people a group of letters, 3 rows of letters, and he flashes it on the screen really fast, 50 milliseconds. Okay. Then, after exposing it to a very short amount of time, boom, flash on the screen, 1/20th of a second. He asked subjects to recall as many letters as they can. And they can recall maybe a bit less than half of the letters. Okay? So, clearly, we're getting something in that short amount of time, but maybe not everything. Okay? So, the exposure time's so small, we can't rehearse them, so we can't keep it in our short-term memory. So basically, when we're asked to remember it, can't do anything with it. Now, what happens, however, if Sperling were to give us a clue? As again, you see 3 rows of letters here. Flash on the screen, 50 milliseconds, 1/20th of a second. Really just, boom, flash on the screen, off. Still tough to remember. But now, the researcher is going to give you a hint. He's going to say, immediately after we flash the letters on the screen, we're going to play a sound. If the sound has a low tone, then you have to remember and state. Then you have to state the top row. You have to identify the letters in the top row. If it's a medium tone, you have to remember the letters in the middle row. And if it's a high tone, you have to remember the information in the third row. Well, when he did this, he found that everybody got it right. Everybody got it right. It doesn't matter whether it's the top row, middle row, third row. When they gave that cue, and the cue came after the image was presented, that's very important. If the sound came before the image was presented, then the subject could just simply pay attention to the appropriate row and ignore the other 2 rows. That would be cheating. In this case, it's flashed on the screen. So when it's flashed on the screen, the subject does not know which row they need to pay attention to. They only know once they play that tone. Boom. Then they can do that. This provides evidence, important evidence, because what it tells you is that the subjects saw and remembered everything. They had to have had the capacity to remember all 3 rows, because they got it right when they played the top, low, middle, low, medium, or high tone. They got it right every time. The only way they could have gotten it right every time is if they actually remembered, for a very short period of time, of course, all of the rows. And that was the conclusion that he made. But now, as I said before, sensory memory, very large capacity, but doesn't last very long. Therefore, if a certain period of time passes, you're going to forget it. So Sperling did another version of this test where he would flash the image of the 9 letters on the screen, but then before playing the sound, he put in a time delay. flash it on the screen, then put in a time delay, now subjects have difficulty remembering. Why? Because in that time delay, they are starting to forget everything they saw. Therefore, it doesn't matter whether you play the high tone, medium tone, or low tone, the memory is disappearing. So basically, you are going to lose much of it. So only about 33% if there's that time delay. And he also varied the time delay in research. So he varied the time delay in the research, making it so that if it was a from like a full second to just a 0.15 seconds. Remember, if the tone comes immediately after the image is presented, then subjects do a perfect job of remembering. But if there's any kind of time delay, 0.15 seconds, 0.3 seconds, half a second, and a full second, as you can see in this chart, the longer the delay, the greater the memory loss. Probably after 3 seconds, can't remember anything. Well, maybe they might have been able to still remember one letter if they were able to rehearse it, but most likely it's all gone. So your sensory memory does remember a lot, but it doesn't last very long. And again, you got to pay attention to just a small part of it. Now let's talk a little bit about short-term memory. As I said, you can also look, again, you can talk about short-term memory in terms of working memory or short-term memory, but basically you're paying attention to the information that's coming from your sensory memory, paying attention to a small amount of it, working with it, and then you're going to be able to either use it right now or be able to then store it for later. As I said before, 20 to 30 second duration, limited capacity, 7 plus or minus 2. It's actually called the magic number 7. The magic number 7 is that 7 pieces of information that we can process in our short-term memory or in our working memory. Anything more than that, we can't handle it. Even the memory experts cannot handle it. The way the memory experts handle it is they change the information into something they can manage. Let's talk about that. We can improve short-term memory. One of the most important ways of doing it is a process called chunking. How do memory experts remember so many different, they may remember like 150 digits in a row, right? You have memory experts who can do this. Even if it's a memory expert, the memory expert cannot process 150 pieces of information in his or her short-term or working memory. It cannot be done. What they can do, however, is take those 150 digits and group them into chunks. They might be able to remember one group of digits as one unit and another group of digits as another unit. Maybe they have a way of figuring out a sequence. Maybe they have a way of telling a story about the digits, connecting them to something they already know. Elaboration, remember? Being able to make those connections. So in other words, they see those digits as more than just numbers. They see them as having a larger meaning, and they make connections with that larger meaning. So basically, you can remember, for example, if you have a phone number, right? Phone number is 7 digits. We can chunk a phone number into those two, we have the first 3 numbers of the phone number and then the last 4. We can chunk those into 2 units now. So instead of 7 units, it's 2 units. We even have a little song that we sing when we are remembering phone numbers. And it goes like this. Da da da, da 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 da. We have that cadence that we come up with to remember phone numbers, and that allows us to group phone numbers no longer into 7 pieces of information, now just 2. The memory experts are really, 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 really good at chunking. They're really good at coming up with ways of combining pieces of information to reduce the number of things they need to remember. That is how they are doing it. It is not about having a superhuman capacity of remembering 150 different things all at once. They take those 150 things and they reduce it perhaps into 5 things. And any one of us can remember 5 things and process 5 things in our short-term memory. And that is what they are doing. Rehearsal is another thing that we do with short-term memory. We repeat the information over and over and over again when it comes to the information we're trying to work with. Well, this rehearsal will keep it in our short-term memory so we will not forget it, and we'll be able to either store it into long-term memory or use it now and forget about it later. But the rehearsal is very important as a way of processing. And again, when you're connecting it with, when you're elaborating with it, you can think about how you're encoding this information. You encode it strongly. You can connect it to what you already know. Repeat the information. Again, allowing you to further then store it into your long-term memory.